by shifting from hating the parts of us that we don't like, to being curious about them, to thanking them, to softening, to opening up to them, that is what allows the change process to happen. Welcome to this week's Spotlight Saturday. So for Spotlight Saturday, I like to talk about books or research or courses, workshops that have either had a particular influence on me in my life as someone on a self-development path, or indeed my life as a practitioner. And this book I'm going to talk about this week has influenced both, but I think particularly it shifted how I saw my work working with people. It was one of the early books that I read in my training as a practitioner. And up until that point, had very much come from this idea that the issues we have, be it symptoms, be it emotions, are kind of things that we need to fix. And this is it was early in my work's evolved since then, but this was one of the things that I think helped that development and that evolution. And it's a book called Core Transformation. It's by Connirae and Tamara Andreas. And it was one of the second wave, I guess, of books that came out of NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I think it was partly a reaction to the fact that a lot of the NLP work at that point had been very solution-oriented, very much about kind of fixing kind of issues. And although there was a recognition of this idea, which is one of the core elements of the book, that there are different parts in us, and those different parts of us can have different desires, different outcomes, and can end up in conflict. Often the way to resolve parts, the kind of known process in the early days of NLP, was called the 6-step reframe. And it was basically about giving the part that's causing a problem a new job. So the part of us that is constantly kind of looking for what could go wrong, like the kind of part of us almost like sabotaging by finding problems, that you'd retask that part to look for all the ways that it can make things go right, for example. Well, the shift in understanding in the book Core Transformation is really that all of the parts of us, they have a positive intention. And by understanding that positive intention, that can be a gateway to change and transformation. That let's say that we want to, in fact, one of the quite famous applications of this work is around stopping smoking. So let's say you want to stop smoking, or you've got a bad habit that you want to change. Perhaps there's a part of you that always loses your temper in certain situations. So you'd look at the part of you that wants to smoke, for example, and perhaps it wants certain things through smoking. And then you look at the part of you that wants to stop. And often we want to destroy the part that wants to smoke, but we want to kind of build up the part that wants to stop. But really all we're doing is we're trying to build up our willpower against this quite powerful force inside of us that wants an outcome, that wants something that's trying to get. And we end up within a civil war because we're just constantly fighting ourselves, and sometimes one part wins and sometimes the other part wins. So this idea of different parts of us being in conflict inside of us is obviously a common one, and lots of people resonate with this. It might just be the part of us that's always telling us that we could, the inner critic's a part of us. We're always saying, you could do it better, it's not good enough, you're not enough as you are. By understanding that these parts of us have positive intentions, what that means is we can start to shift the way that we engage with them. And what I like about the way that the book orients this, and the technique called Core Transformation, which the book is built around, is this idea that we need to open up dialogue with these different parts of us on a conscious level and sometimes on a somewhat unconscious level. Well, if we need to open dialogue with someone that we're in some kind of disagreement or conflict with, we don't do that by reaching out and telling them how wrong they are, how we want to get rid of them, how they're a terrible person. We need to build trust. We need to build a kind of environment of care and support. The way we do that in the core transformation process is we start to thank the part of us. Even though we might not like the behavior, We thank it for its intention. We thank it for how hard it's working for us. And one of the things that we find therapeutically working with this process is that we start to shift the way that we feel towards the issue or the thing that we want to change. Let's say the part of us is manifesting as a headache, and we're really frustrated, want to get rid of this headache, I hate this headache. If we shift that to really being curious, to being open, to being soft, to being loving, like loving the headache, that sounds a bit weird. There's often steps we need to go to get there. It takes away the layer of stress upon the layer of stress. So if the headache is a kind of source of kind of held tension, and then we want to get rid of it and we're frustrated, that's a new layer on top. By removing this layer on top, we start to open things up. We start to create more of an opening. So within this core transformation process, we take time to thank, to acknowledge, to be curious about that part of us. This book talks about a process that we go through to get to the underlying intention behind the behavior. So let's take the example of smoking. Maybe the thing is we want through smoking is that we want to fit in and be popular. Maybe that's why we started smoking. We go for a series of questions, and the kind of main question is, what's this part of you want for you that's positive through doing what it's been doing? And I'm fast tracking what can often be a 45-minute, hour-long process here. But maybe what we come to is what it wants that's positive is it wants me to feel popular. And we go through the question again. And the next time the answer is, well, if I was popular, if you had that, what could you experience that's even more important? If I was popular, then I'd be loved. And then if I was loved, then I would feel like I could love myself. And I'll keep asking this question, if I feel like I could love myself, well, then maybe I'd contact the world from a place of just love. There would be love. We start to move from states of doing to states of being. So rather than I need to do something to get this, we start to get to these states as inherent core ingredients of who it is that we are as people. So this book really describes a process where we're going through different layers. We're going through this kind of, firstly, it helps us understand the different kind of parts of us, and then we're going into thanking, like really acknowledging and appreciating the part to open up. We're then exploring what it wants to get for us that's positive. And then often what that helps us do is get to a deeper state of connection to that. That almost by inquiring into what we're trying to get, we find ourselves connected to that state. There's more to it than that. And this is a process this is book primarily, I think it's written for general public, but we tend to recommend it as part of the practitioner training, as a particular therapeutic process that we use. I don't think it's that easy to do this process with yourself the way that it's described in the book. I think it's easier to do it with other people as a practitioner. But I think this core principle, there's several core principles, particularly this one around thanking and acknowledging the parts of us that feel difficult. That is kind of globally helpful. For those of you that know EFT, you'll know that the kind of setup phrase, even though I have this issue, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. It's a different version of the same thing. That if we want to create change, we have to create, we have to lay the foundation. We have to kind of create the landscape that's going to allow change to happen. And a lot of what that is softness and openness and gentleness. And yes, there need to be sometimes some boundaries and some holding often around that. But by shifting from hating the parts of us that we don't like, to being curious about them, to thanking them, to softening, to opening up to them, that is what allows the change process to happen. This other core principle, behind all the things we're trying to do, there's a state of being that we're trying to get. There is nothing that you can ultimately do to get a state of being, because a state of being is already there. It's where are you in relationship to it. If you're disconnected from it, then it feels like it's not there. These states of love and being and peace and holding, they don't leave us. We leave them. We go off in our mind, we get distracted, and we go looking for this thing that we've lost contact with in the world out there. But actually it's not out there. It's in us. But we need to work through these layers to be more in contact with that. So Core Transformation, great book. Not so easy, as I say, to do the process, I think, through the book. but some really good, helpful principles about shifting the way that we relate to the different parts of ourselves. This idea of how we relate to the parts of ourselves, I will build on this much more in other episodes of Everyday Alex, but I thought that was a good book to open up some of those ideas. Tomorrow it's Soul Food Sunday, and we've got an excerpt from Gemma Hunt, who's one of the psychology practitioners here at the Optimum Health Clinic. We've got an excerpt from her recovery story as part of the Fatigue Super Conference. So that's coming up tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.